Hey, gang, when you're listening to this, the end of the season is really close, and we know you like to get gifts for your players and your coaches and everyone and anything in between. So why not give your players an end-of-season gift that they'll actually use all year long? The Hockey Wraparound Team Deal is here, and it's saving the day. Yes, that's a pun. Let's do it. What's included? 10 hockey wraparounds, 2 goalie wraparounds. You can mix and match however you want if you contact us, but it helps to protect the expensive hockey sticks when playing off the ice so your kids won't destroy their hockey sticks. It also allows your kids to train all year round, especially in the summer. Shots, puck handling, we make it for goalies too. It is the ultimate off-ice training experience. All of this for your whole team, $199. That's a $500 value. Again, $199 divided by however many kids you have. If you need more, we can add them on at a limited price as well. Act fast. It's only available for a limited time. Check it out at hockeywraparound.com right now. Get your team covered for the offseason. We got you covered here on Our Kids Play Hockey. Let's dive into the episode. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome back to another episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. It's Lee and Mike with you today, and our guest was a pro hockey player, and today is a pro mental performance coach at the NHL level. Vinny Malts began his hockey career in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League with the Hull Olympiques and was drafted by the Vancouver Canucks in the '98 NHL entry draft. After a decade-long professional playing career, he transitioned into coaching, bringing his on-ice experience to various levels, including the ECHL and junior hockey. Today, as the founder of Bloodline Hockey, Vinny has dedicated over 20 years to mental performance training for athletes, integrating mental conditioning into athletes' training regimens, aiming to increase confidence, mental toughness, and consistency for all. His expertise has led him to roles with several teams and organizations, including being the first mindset performance coach in the NHL, having worked with the Chicago Blackhawks, and today, the Edmonton Oilers. Today is all about the power of mental performance and how we can provide that to our kids. He's a husband, he's a dad, he's our guest today. Vinny, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all that intro.
We take pride in our intros, man. We don't want to just come on and be like, here he is, Vinny. We like to let the audience know your accomplishments.
Yeah, no doubt.
I never want to start an episode. So, Vinny, tell us about yourself.
That's
not my favorite thing to do. But, hey, Vinny, look, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. Listeners, just so you know, this is someone we're going to want you to follow on socials, particularly at Coach Vinny Malts is his handle. I love your stuff so much. You've taken mental performance training to the NHL. Can you talk to our audience, particularly the parents, about why professional teams are prioritizing mental performance training today?
Yeah, great question. It's funny. There's so many different, segments to it, but I guess the fundamental one is now, just like strength conditioning started and had its era where when it came up and players adapted and realized, oh, wow, if I strengthen my body and I build it up, well, now it's going to increase my performance and it's going to make me even better. And so what's happened in today's world, and you guys will appreciate this, where there's so much to think about now. There's so many thoughts, in the sphere of information. And so now what it's evolved into, what back then was strength and conditioning, is now mental performance, because oh, wow, there's endless ways to think about this process. There's so many things you can think about. But do you have a way to actually concentrate your thinking? Do you have a way to actually know with your belief system what matters most? And that's a huge competitive advantage in today's game and in today's world. So as a professional now, that's why it's become professionalized as a process. Because if you don't have it, it's literally impossible, I would say, to succeed at that level anymore.
Right.
Because if you don't have a way of figuring out why you think a certain way, what you're going to focus in on, how you're going to handle emotional things that are going to pop up, how you're going to handle what's going on with others, the judgments. So if you don't have a way to consolidate that and stay focused on your own process and know, well, I know these are the outside factors. It doesn't matter to my process. If you don't do that as a pretty much daily check-in, there's no way you're going to succeed at a professional level in any high level. There's plenty of professions you can get into, but when we're talking about high level and you're talking about the best of the best kind of environments that, super challenging to do it without mental performance.
Do you think that mental performance piece, you mentioned about, the ability for those players to use that as a muscle. Do you think it could be the same thing as sports performance where it's overused, like they're overthinking? There's
1,000%.
way too much info. Think about the player now from where you were and where they are. And the amount of information these players have to process. It's got to be such. And at the pro level, I talked to a Division I college coach yesterday that taught. We were just kind of spitballing a little bit about some of the tools they use for the kids. He's like, oh, we have Catapult, we have Huddle, we have Instat, we have Metricing, we have all this all this stuff that the kids are exposed to, and it's like sometimes you just gotta wipe it away. It's just way too much information for these kids.
You nailed it, Mike. You nailed it. So the art of what I do with my role is figuring out what's the most important piece of information for you, and then we build off of that and help them to clarify what doesn't matter. Well, these are the situations, right? So to your point, some players may love to watch video and that ignites them, but literally there's some that it stresses them out. Right. They think they have to be perfect in every single segment, all that. So when I identify that, through our process and look at it, I go, okay, then we can't watch as much video. You've got to eliminate that, because for you personally, that's an overload on the system. So to your point, right, it's being very conscious of which players need, how much do they need, how much do they not need, right? And it's funny, I'll always get into different arguments with different, leadership, where on that end of where they'll make the argument of, well, isn't this too much? Well, some players actually need more because they don't even know in their schema and their frameworks in their own mind how to even think in process-oriented, scientific orientation. Like there's no step-by-step process that allows them to repeat it, that allows them to do it over and over again, right? Like when we talk about sustainability. So some might need a little bit more, others need less, but that's what you have to figure out is this the player who's good with less and, they get it? Or is this the player who, wow, there's actually no history there to know how to utilize this. So we have to educate them first on the front end, then pull back on the back end. So there's a whole nuanced art that I'm sure, Lee, you can appreciate.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Vinny, what's funny to me is that, I always appreciate when a coach says to me, look, this mental stuff, I know I need it, but I don't know where to start. All right. First, it's a great question. All right. And my answer usually is, well, you probably know more than you think. Right. Yep. And what you just described is really similar to going to the gym for the first time. Yep. All right. And I always call it like mental fitness, right? When you go to the gym, if you've never been to the gym before, like you're just saying, it's kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of different machines. I don't know what to work on. What do I do? And if you get a good coach or a good trainer, they're going to say, well, okay, what do you want to work on? What makes you feel good? Well, I want to work on my upper body. All right, now we have a direction we can go into. Let's show you the machines. Well, I like this machine. I don't like that machine. You start to develop a plan. You find the environment. You find the plan. No two athletes probably have the exact same workout. And your mind works exactly the same way. And again, I always make this metaphor too. We're real patient with kids when they're learning to walk. They all do it at different paces and different times. We're all accepting of that. But when it comes to the mind, it's, well, wait, is that too much? Is that too much? Well, that's why we have to tinker. And I've always loved that metaphor between the gym, like the physical workout gym, and the mental gym. Athletes, coaches, parents, families, you have to find what works for you. And it may change over time, right? And again, if you want gigantic triceps, when you get them, you might want to move on to something else, but you got to maintain the triceps. There's a lot of similarities there. The other thing I wanted to bring up, Vinny, is we were just talking about pro athletes. I'm not saying that a pro athlete's life is simple in any way, but there's a clear focus when you're a pro athlete.
Correct. Bringing
this back to kids, and this is something I implore to parents. I actually think a kid's life is a lot harder mentally in a lot of ways than a pro athlete's life. They have school. They have families. They are growing up, and at whatever age they're at, they're dealing with whatever issues come with that age, right? I mean, there's so much, multiple sports, pressure from everywhere. And we treat them like this is no big deal. This is no big deal. It's like, guys, they have a crazier life than we did. I always tell parents, Vinny, put yourself in your kid's schedule. Could you survive that today, right? Physically, probably not. Mentally, probably. But I want to ask this question. What are some of the first steps or stepping stones that youth hockey families can take to get these mental reps at home, keeping in mind kind of everything we just said?
No, you nailed it. One of the first things that we have to recognize through everything you just laid out there and framed is there's between certainty and uncertainty, right? There's a lot of uncertainty when you're younger and you're coming out to your point, right? Biologically, we all know teenage years, it's all about the peers. I'm not listening to people that are giving me advice. I'm listening more. I'm modeling. This person's drafted in USHL. This person got committed. There's way more of this comparison and judgment that, no, you shouldn't compare. You shouldn't judge. And we try to layer that on. And it's like, well, don't look at the pink elephant. It's just the same thing. Like, no, that's not how it works, right? So, the biggest part of when you talk about the tools is recognizing that there is a huge difference between a professional and a youth player.
Right.
And unfortunately, what I've seen through the years, and we've all seen, is that, oh, look at that YouTube clip of an NHL team doing that practice. Look what they're doing in practice. Great. These kids are 10U, squirt B, whatever it is. Yeah, let's implement that into our practice today. And you've got 10 kids are still standing and waiting, and the practice continues on, and the coach thinks they're a genius on, wow, I took an NHL framing and put it into our practice. What a great drill. I'm so good. And so that's where a lot of this stuff has to get to the forefront, is that fundamentally, are we differentiating? They're two different worlds.
Right.
In the youth world, there's a ton of uncertainty. We have no idea what's going to happen. We have no idea the trajectory of the kid. Literally, NHL scouts don't know. No one knows. You risk and probability, you kind of do the best you can, but no one actually knows, right? So when you're younger, that uncertainty is massive. It's way bigger. We have no idea. Is the kid going to love it? What's going to happen in the future? We have no idea what's going to happen. But once you become a professional, well, you just signed a contract. You now have more certainty. You have gotten paid. So you have a job to do. You have a clear focus, and there's plenty of uncertain things that happen as a professional, but you now have been hired to do a job. So now there's some certainty that goes on. I know this is my role. I know that's required of me. I'm going to get all the support to make sure that I'm clear on what I need to do. So there's way more of that going on, where there's this certainty level that goes on because you've now been paid to do a job.
Right.
At the amateur youth level, that's not reality. So we have to first, number one, stop taking principles from the professional level and saying, oh, let's use them at youth. They're literally two different worlds, right? It's like the universe of the duality of energy, night and day, hot and cold, positive, negative, love and hate, take your pick. So it's just got to be amateur, professional. Divide them and figure out how they balance out, but they have to be two completely different worlds on the spectrum, right? They kind of do this as you grow,
right,
but they are completely two different animals. So that's the first thing, is stop taking, especially when they're 8, 9, 10 years old. They are so far away from this spot. Stop taking the principles and trying to infuse them in when they're this young. So that's the first thing that I'd say, is that we have to delineate that there's a major difference between the two, and then start to build upon, okay, so then what does that look like for my child? Then now they're growing and they're young. And so to your point, a lot of what, I dial in on with my own kids, right? And my son is turning 8 this week. My daughter just turned 11 this morning, right? So
hey, happy birthday to her. Other than that.
Yeah, thank you. So the idea, right, is that I'm always, as a professional, as somebody trained in this, I'm always checking my biases on, they're still children. Be patient. Right. They don't know yet. You guys should be doing it. No. They don't know yet. They're young. They have no idea. So I think that's the first part that needs to, get some sunlight on it. Is it's really hard at the beginning, because everyone has these professional ideas that they want to infuse into their kids and into the youth, when the reality is it takes time. All of us, if we look at our pattern of how we developed as human beings, it took us time engaging with the world, experiencing things, going through different scenarios, making mistakes. And as we went, we learned, okay, now that makes sense. As opposed to what I see a lot of is, well, I'm telling you what you need to do. You should already know. And this frustration, and there's still yelling and all that stuff that continues on at these younger levels, when it's like, that's not reality. So the differentiating, right, of really understanding that there's a huge difference between the two. And we have to stop trying to intertwine the two worlds and say, okay, this is youth. It's a totally different ballgame. What does that actually look like? As opposed to a lot of the pundits we know, guys, it's still, well, the NHL and the pros, and don't you want to play at the NHL, and don't you want to play Division I, and don't you want to, and it's like, what are we doing? Like, that's not, maybe they don't want to. And that's completely okay.
It's such an odd thing, because if you really, if your only goal was to produce a professional athlete, you would do everything different than what we do. But so because it's like because it's just and this is where I think I have the biggest issue or concern or sadness about where we are in youth sports now. All the athletes we talk to from a certain generation, especially on the show, because it's really opened us up to talking to so many different types of people and backgrounds and the way they developed. For many, many, many years, it was you've got to play multi-sport. You have to be just playing for the fun of it, for the love of it, the unprofessionals. But what's happening now, which I'm seeing in like the last 8 years, is that ability for a player to do all those things is squeezing out. But yet, I don't even know if it's the best players, I guess. And Vinny, maybe you could speak to this a little bit. Is it just the kids that survive that environment that end up getting to the highest level, as opposed to opening it up to all the kids that could get to the highest level? And then we talk about the mental piece of that and the physical strain of that. And then the ability to say, well, we didn't expose our kids to anything else but this, and it's the same in soccer and in tennis and in equestrian. Like, it seems like we're all going down this road that every parent is a evaluating professional and can say that their 8-year-old is going to become this. And if you take 100 kids, you're going to get one, I guess, maybe to become a professional. But then that's the person we use as our example. And to me, it's just so hard to talk to families about that, because the only one they're talking about is the one.
Bingo. And Mike, you nailed it. Where the challenge that I've found through the years with this, that's funny. I actually cut this like random. Sometimes I'll do these like raw takes and just kind of go into it. Maybe I'll post it, maybe I won't. But it was kind of like along those lines of the biggest issue we're dealing with is that we keep wanting to compare ourselves to that top player as players are coming up. So they see the top player, and now it's like, oh, I got to try that. What does that player do? What are they doing? So the modeling effect that everybody talks about. I've got to model their behavior. And what people are not recognizing about the truth of it, those players are not modeling anybody. They're just being who they are. Mm-hmm. So, I came up, I was really fortunate that I came up doing East Coast Selects years ago, right? So I did it for about 12 years. And I went through a couple of rotations. I had Ivan Provorov, Daniel Sprong, Zegras, right? I had them for 4 years as young men, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, all those like formative years. And it was wild to watch that these were the top dogs when they were younger like that, and how when they would play, the things that they were doing is just the stuff they were doing. They, like Provorov, loved to train like a maniac all the time. Sprong the same way. They just loved it. Like, it was like to them breathing to go out and do it. And, the same thing with Zegras. Like, it was just like, I want to work on my skills all the time. From a young age, they just loved doing that. You didn't have to tell them you go try that. You didn't have to say, we're going to go do this clinic and we're going to go sign up for this. And we're going to make sure you do all the stuff because we got to get you at that level. None of them were trying. They were just like breathing, going and waking up and going out. And I'm like, I'm going to go do that today because that's just what I want to do. They weren't chasing anybody. Everybody was chasing them. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to call it, is now there's way more of those players that are legit like that are just doing their thing. And there's better resources now to allow them to explore their thing even deeper and become even better at it. But then there's all these other people that are like watching them and going like modeling, go, ooh, if I want to play at that level, that's what I need to do. And it's like, you don't get it. It's natural to them. They're not doing anything. They're not trying anything. They're just being who they are. You, in fact, are trying. So by trying to catch up, you'll never catch them because they're not trying. They're just doing and being. And that is so hard for so many families to recognize that. Like, so much of our work of what we do is I'm battling for, Mike, all the time, and Lee, you appreciate this, is what do you naturally do? How do you naturally think? How do you instinctively process the world? And let's build on that so you don't have to try so hard anymore. And that is completely counterintuitive to what people think this is.
Right.
And unfortunately, with the business and information age and all this stuff, and we all know there's the actors that are out there, and some of them are good. They have good intentions. But what they're not recognizing is nature. That you're not going to science this kid or this family into doing something that they don't have spirit attached to.
Ooh,
If they don't have that spiritual law of that's just breathing to me, that's how I came out of the womb, I'm just designed for this. If that isn't in them, in today's world with the amount of resources now and identifying who has it, you're not catching those guys.
Yeah, I think it's funny that when you say that. I mean, most of the kids that I work with now are always trying to get to the same place as the kids they're going after. And I'm like, well, if you continue on their path, which you don't even know which path they're taking because they're just taking it, like, then you can't ever catch up. Like, you could do the exact same training program as the kids that are better than you.
Bingo.
But you actually have to do something different. Like, you have to find your way. You have to find, and it might not be, or, and I guess the example I'll use, and parents certainly don't love this, is like, you either will find that way or you won't. And if you don't, it just is what it is. I love that the visualization of the spiritual piece of that. You're finding who you are, not who that guy is. And I got to find out that guy's spirit, because I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what is in his heart. I don't know why he is motivated or she is motivated to get up and work out in the morning. And I have a whole group of other parents saying, well, Mike, I'm working with two ex-Division I hockey dads right now and their sons. And the question's always like, well, Mike, how do I get so-and-so to get up and go to the shooting room? Or how do I go get so-and-so to work on the nutrition?
How do I get them to work harder?
Yeah, how do I get them to work
harder? I said, think about it. How many times did your dad drag you out of bed to go to practice? Said, nothing. I never did it. I said, well, there's your answer right there.
Yeah.
And I said, and that's really hard. That's hard for a parent to hear, because they think we all think we can navigate and snowplow that out, right? Yep. Like we could get them, if we could just get them over that little piece, then they'll find the spark. And it
doesn't work that way. I say this a lot. You can't create it. You can help to cultivate it. Yes. That can be done. That's within your circle of influence, but you cannot create it. I'm taking a lot of great notes here. And this was one for parents and coaches. This goes so far beyond hockey. Some of the best advice was in this one quote. You got to meet these kids where they're at. You got to meet kids where they're at. You can't force them. First off, parents, if you try forcing your kids to do something, you already know what's going to happen, right?
Human nature, yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that. And here's the other thing too, because I get those questions too, Mike. And I just spoken to a parent the other week. My kid just doesn't have that extra level. And you know what I said? That's okay.
Exactly.
That's okay right now. And here's the thing. I hope that they do find it. Odds are they will if they continue to play sports. But it takes a long time to cook a person, a hockey player. Right, there are adults that have not found the spark in their lives yet. And again, we put this on our kids. And I always say that, listen, it's okay if you don't find the spark. And the other thing too is we're all saying this, don't compare someone who has the spark. All right. I can only speak for myself. I loved to practice. I loved it. It wasn't a sacrifice for me to do that. We had Sherry Piper on the show a few weeks back, Olympian gold medalist. And she said this, it was so profound of, I'm so tired of hearing people say I had to sacrifice everything. It was a choice I made. I wanted to do it. Right. If you're sacrificing in your mind, I don't mean metaphorically. I mean literally. If you're thinking it's a sacrifice for me to have to practice, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. It's not right. If you shouldn't have to sacrifice, you should love it. And again, parents, if they don't love it yet, that's fine. It also might mean this isn't their thing. All right. When you see a kid pick up an instrument, whatever it is, and they start playing, they're playing it all the time. They love that instrument. They've found something there. Now, I will say this from a cultivating point. When they do find that spark, you can explain to them that you can apply that to a lot of different things. All right. Like when I started, again, writing my first book, it was hockey to me. Starting a podcast, it was hockey to me. That's how I justified it in my head. Oh, it's the same work. It's just in a different format.
Exactly.
But I had to find that before I could even understand what I'm talking about. Yeah. Vinny just showed, for those of you listening, a great book. It takes what it takes. But again, it was never a sacrifice. The sacrifice to me would have been not doing it.
Bingo.
Right? And not everybody gets there. And I got to say this one more time. That is okay. Exactly. It's okay. Go ahead.
Exactly. No, and you guys nailed it. It's a simple analogy that I always try to, like, that most players can relate to is, I'm like, hey, have you ever, seen a player come out to a skate and you're just like, wow, that player's amazing. Like, oh my God, how are they not in the NHL? Like, they're unbelievable. I can't believe they're not in the NHL. And then you see another player and you're like, oh my God, how is that player in the NHL? I can't believe it. Da, da, da. Like, that's incredible. Like, oh, like they're not that good. And the differentiator is this, is that player realized, you know what? I'm okay with chipping pucks. I'm okay with doing that, no problem, and blocking shots. I will do that for a living. Yes, whatever it takes, I will do it, and I'm all in, and I will commit to that. And so what they did was they cleared away the noise of all the, but I got to be a goal scorer, and I got to dangle people, and I got to go work on my one-on-one Instagram hands and do everything, and I got to beat cones one-on-one because that's what hockey is. What they aligned with and they realized was, wait, no, that's what I want to commit to. I want to be a professional, so I'm willing to do whatever skill set is going to get me into being a professional.
Right.
Whereas now you're trying to do all the skill sets. You're trying to become everything at once. And that is what messes up so many people that is not even the way anything works. Like, you think about how you became, right? How any of us became who we became. It's because we just kept doing stuff, reiterating. You get fired from here, you did this here, but you just keep on this path. And then eventually, like you guys said, eventually you end up in a place where, okay, I chose to be here, or, well, I got no other choice. This is because this is what life gave me.
Yeah, most of these guys I'm working with now, right, especially like the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, we don't even work on the things they're bad at. We really work on the stuff they're good at. Right. And I'm like, well, because I can't help, like, I can't change this about you. I mean, I could, but you'd have to, you need a couple $1 million and you have to not play hockey like in a formalized setting for a year. Like, yes, could it be done? Well, maybe not, right? Tim Tebow couldn't do it. Like, it's just, you can only, because it's ingrained in your DNA. But I think to your point, I think we underscore. We just did that episode rightly on the underappreciated defenseman.
Yeah.
It's just because not everybody has to be a first line centerman. And I think what happens is people don't. I work. Vinny, we work a lot with Mike Weaver, and I do a camp with him. And one of the things we talk about all the time is like, listen, I was just a great puck eating defenseman that got the puck out of the zone. I did my job every time. And we were laughing, like, if there was a third assist in the NHL, I would have led the league because nobody saw the play at the goal line. Nobody saw the chip out to center ice. But to your point, this is where I think as coaches for youth level, certainly the ability to take a 6 to a 10-year-old and expose them to all of those things. So we don't know. We got to find it. But at some point, you have to start leaning on and being advised on the fact that you're good at this. Embrace it, use it, and then go with it, and then try to learn all the other aspects of what you can do to support this great piece of your game, mentally, physically, knowing the game, hockey IQ, figuring all that out around the skill set you currently have, as opposed to always trying to chase the skill set that you want that you won't get.
Mike, that was beautiful. You nailed it. What an opportunity in youth. That what if we, instead of focusing in on when the kids are younger, like, you need to be better at this, because your bias is what you think the model is that exists as a generality, that everyone needs to do that. As opposed to, and a lot of coaches fall into this negativity because of that. I'm so frustrated. They're making mistakes, right? They get these biases like, you're not perfect. You're not doing it. As opposed to, you know what? Oh, you created that shot that we talked about, that you're so good at creating that play. You did it. Good job. Keep doing it. So you took away all the other constraints that you think the kid should be doing, and now you're focusing on seeing, oh, good, you're doing the thing that you're naturally good at, that we've talked about, that I'm encouraging in you in that belief system, and now I see you're actually doing it. I love it. This is awesome. Now it solves the problem of negativity. Now you're feeling good that you're participating with this player, you're developing them, you're increasing that, and, oh, by the way, spiritually, you're keeping yourself from going insane because it's a kid that just doesn't, quote unquote, listen. But now you're taking what they naturally do and they don't even have to try. You're just building upon that layer. How much easier it is for you to now enjoy the process of coaching 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13. Like, I get when they start to get older, high school, it's what it is. But the younger levels, 100% spot on of teaching more of that lens and recognizing, focus on that. Because all the other stuff, if you're there, skating, shooting, the general stuff, if you're already at that level,
Right.
that means you have a general baseline that's good enough to be at that level.
I got to bring this up too. I've been blessed to coach at almost every level, especially youth. And it blows my mind sometimes what I see at the youth level. In fact, we're going to have a pretty good conversation here. I assume some of these clips we're about to make from this are going to go a little viral because we're going to be outspoken. But things like this, when I coach 10U, right? There's so much emphasis from people on our record. And I cannot tell you our record. I have an idea what it is, but I don't care. And I'm with a team right now where I can say with confidence, this team, these players have all developed more than probably any other team in the organization. It's not a shot at any other team, but man, what a win. And I'm looking at like everyone has improved in some way, right? Whether it's mentally, skill-wise, physically. And I love coaching them. And that's such a win to me, right? But a lot of it comes down to what you're saying, Vinny and Mike, of, well, let's see what you excel at. So something I do, and I gotta make sure I preface this. I never do this at the start of the season, what I'm about to say. Okay? This is something that evolves as the season goes on. But as we're approaching the end of season now, we're able to start explaining the importance of roles, that you are not locked into a role, but at this point of the season, hey, you're excelling at this, and this helps this player with this. And we've actually pointed out these players are goal scorers. Doesn't mean you guys can't score, okay? These players are a goal scorer. They like to score. They have a talent for scoring. Who's going to be a great playmaker? Mike, to your point, the D, we need to make that good first pass. D, you're doing great at that first pass. We're just identifying small things that each kid does good to try and help the team succeed. Yeah. And I got to preface this again because I don't want people to lose what I'm saying here. It's not about creating roles on the first day and think it's now we're seeing what's working. Let's emphasize that you have a role on this team, even if you're not getting a hat trick every game. Defense, we just said it, defense, that first pass, so important. Wingers, your ability to get that puck out of our zone or get it to the center, so important. You have a role, right? I don't think any player wants to hear your role is just not to be a liability the whole game. All right, and don't get me wrong. That's
although if that is your role, then you have a good coach will hide that role. Like be able to find a way for you to not think that. Like so the bottom line, like that, and that's. But you're hitting it on the head. Like we're not defining kids; they're defining themselves. Right. Like I'm not defining you. These are the realities I'm working with here. So let's now enhance who you can be for this team. Now, is that going to be you next year? I don't know. It all depends on what you do. But I think that's where, like, as you. And Vinny, can you talk about this a little bit? Because I know you're in the youth hocky world now. Yeah. Or
now.
You are.
He is now.
Yeah. I mean, back.
But I mean, but working from like at the pro level where it's cutthroat and it's a job to now getting down to a younger level and telling a parent, okay, we're not going to professionalize your 8-year-old, but these are the realities of who your 8-year-olds are and who they can be. And how do I put you in a situation, to Lee's point, you're not putting you in a box, but if you worry about scores, if you worry about records, if you worry about all the other things that are in my hockey rankings, if you worry about all those other things that are happening around you, I can't, it's hard for me to do anything for your son or daughter.
Right. Exactly. Well, so two things come to mind, guys, right off the bat, right, of that process. So number one is, Leo, of everything you explained was proof of concept. Right? Like what happens is we start the year blank slate, but as the leaders, as the professionals, right, that are working with your child, educated in the space, understand how development works, I need to see the proof of concept. So a lot of times players or families think, hey, I'm a goal scorer. And one of my favorite questions to always ask players that, come on board with us down the line, they're 16, 17 years old, they fill out the assessment, all that stuff. And, their identity is they say they're a goal scorer. And the first question I'll ask is, how many goals have you had in the last 3 years? Just tell me the overall, how many goals have you had in the last 3 years? And they, like 15 to 20. I'm like, you're not a goal scorer. I didn't need anything. Like, you're not a goal scorer right off the bat. 15 to 20 in 3 years, you're not a goal scorer.
Right.
So it's clearly identifying proof of concept that, I understand you love your child, and we all love your child, but the nature, if you're not instinctively doing and creating, we're not trying to ruin your kid. We're just looking at, there's no proof in the pudding.
Right.
And it brings it back to, concepts in neuroscience too. What happens? First, there's sensation, then there's perception. You feel the thing, right? That's why I play for that feeling. I always talk about it, like you feel the thing, right? And then you perceive the thing. So what we're all experiencing is we're feeling it out. We're watching, we're observing, we're learning. Okay, what do you naturally, what's the tendency? And then once we can clearly identify that, now to elevate that, now as a leader, your job is to communicate that clearly. And that's the second thing, is that we don't do a good enough job of over communicating, over explaining, right? Like we think because we told a player, and I deal with this all the time at all the levels, of where, oh yeah, I talked to that player about it, they're good. You think one time talking to that player, they're good? Not a chance.
Yeah.
And at the youth level, that requires even more attention and care. Is like, I'm going to say it to you the first time. I'm going to articulate what I think ahead of time of, hey, so here's what's going on, guys. Right now, here's the phase that we're in. I'm going to watch the players. We're not going to do roles just yet. But as time goes on, I'm going to clearly identify to you, and I'll be more than willing to share some time with you to explain to you how I came to that conclusion so you can see it too. So you can see, like, there's just a natural order that you're going to watch. And if your child's not doing these things, I'm not pegging them. I'm trying to elevate what I naturally see them doing.
It's such a great point. And, just to even add more kind of parental perspective on this, right? I have coached kids who value goal scoring as the only thing that matters in the game.
Yep.
And it is so hard for them to evolve as a player if that's all they see, because they may not have the skill.
Or here.
Yeah, mentally, right?
Communicate, yeah.
Well, I'm about to dive into that because you did a great video on that. And we must take the time as coaches to sit that player down and say, look, if you want to work on your scoring, let's work on it. But you are so much more than that. There's so much more to the game than that, right? We have to try different aspects. One story I always like telling people, and it's funny because I didn't realize this when I was a youth athlete that I was doing this, but I started really late. And so like scoring was not a thing for me early on. I hadn't developed those skills, but I realized pretty quickly, Vinny, man, I'm pretty good at passing. And so I really dove into becoming a playmaker. And it's funny, when I got older, I'd go to coaches and say, well, I'm more of a playmaker. I really enjoy passing. I didn't realize how much coaches loved hearing that because they have their goal scorer. And now they're hearing, I've got a guy that might be passing to the goal scorer. Nobody passes. And I would get picked for teams because of that. And it wasn't bragging. It was, no, I love passing. I love making the big pass that creates the goal. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have the flexibility to learn that. I also wouldn't have known that if I probably started earlier because I had to figure out what to do to survive at that age. Now, staying on what you're talking about, Vinny, you did a great video early this year about the need for clarity and why it's important to take the time to do that. But you also spoke about social clarity, all right, which you're diving into a little bit now. Can you explain to the audience what that is? And that probably is the next evolution, I think, in coaching. A lot of it has to do with the age group and the technology they've been exposed to, but we must have more social clarity in the game.
Exactly. So I'll give you guys simple examples from the professionals that I've dealt with, so families can actually see the long game of what happens when you don't have that. So one player in particular that I had, right, played for the Devils at one point, all that stuff, then went out to Europe. And so we're having this talk, and he's already at this point, 26. So he's been around for a while. And we start diving into his process. So initially we always work on how do you interpret information? How do you work on, right? And so we go through everything. Okay, cool. We've been working together about 3 years at this point. So he's hammering away. He's got his own process. Okay, now I know my habits, how I need to play, how I need to develop my game in the summers. I got it all down. Bam, beautiful. Well, then he starts evolving in his process. And what happens is as he's out there, he's having trouble playing with some of these players on the power play. He's one of the leaders on the team, and he's really struggling with it. So I ask him a simple question. I go, well, all right, number one, are you having dialogue with those players about what you're thinking? Sometimes a little bit. Yeah, like I'd say probably. Okay, great. So you're having some dialogue about what you're thinking. Great. Awesome. So tell me about that. And so he kind of lays it out. We talk about this and what we want to do here. I'm like, awesome. Is there any constraint that you're dealing with one of the players that you're dealing with that you keep telling over and over again the same thing and they're not adapting to it? And he goes, Yeah, no, there's one guy, boom, right away, his face said it all, right? It was like just like that trigger moment. And I'm like, okay, so you have a choice to make. You either A, keep doing the same thing and getting mad about what's happening, or B, you adapt to that player's behavior. You're going to have to adapt to what they do. So you're going to study what they do, understand what they do, and now you're going to build around what you do around the fact that you just know this is their limitation. This is how they're going to perceive that situation on the flank, on the power play, whatever it is. Like, you're now going to have to say, I know they're going to do this, so I'm either going to adapt my position on what I do, or I'm going to keep getting angry that they're not doing what I want them to do.
Right. That's ego.
Ego. And so that's the social clarity is now, as I've gone down the rabbit hole for years, I'm amazed at the Instagram hands. We laugh about it, right? But the reality is, I'm amazed how you watch these videos. Hockey is a team game, which means that from a mindset perspective, we can sit and Lee, we've talked about this before of like, I see a lot of our peers in the industry of hammer away at, when you hear the way they talk, it's all individualized.
Right.
It's all about, you go out, this is what you're going to do around the cone and go score. Or these are the tools of what you need to do to breathe or visualize and blah, 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 all these things. And I'm amazed how you're not including, well, what does your teammate think?
Right.
What does your coach think? What does the opponent think? Like, if you're not putting in the other variables of what everyone else is thinking in your own thought process, you're missing a huge part of all of, if arguably the most important part. So that social clarity we talk about is on you, because you're trained in the art to understand, oh, wait a second, other people, they don't think about that, right? Like we just said with the parents. That isn't common knowledge. It's not something yet that is a part of, oh, that makes sense. We should be talking like that. So you have to infuse that into going to talk to your teammate and recognizing either A, through discussion, okay, we're having a good discussion and they're adapting to what we're doing, or, wow, we talk about it and they say, yeah, but they don't do. So you know what? I'm going to stop getting upset. They don't do it. I'm going to just do what they do and keep building off of that, because that's just, I'm all good with it.
Yeah. Social
clarity. Like, you have to gain, what are the participating parties around you? What do they think? Then build your schema and build your plan out.
And I also say too, and this is one for adults too, this isn't just for kids. You got to take yourself out of your own little story a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And this is baseline consciousness, but there's 8 billion thoughts going on the planet.
What a concept.
You got to take yourself out of your mind a little bit. Exactly. And when I think about, and Mike, I know you've seen this too, at the younger ages now, something I'm seeing that is different is the inability to communicate. And I think we know where it comes from. It comes from screens. What's funny though is when I see two kids playing Fortnite with headsets on, there's incredible communication on the Fortnite. But we have had to teach our kids, and it's going to sound really funny to people, but we've had to really explain to our kids that, hey, when the goalie makes a big save, you should let him know he made a big save or she made a big save. Or when your buddy makes a good play, you should communicate. That's the baseline, right? Then it's other things too. Like I sat a player down. This was actually really interesting. I had a fourth grader and a second grader, and it was a situation I could have coached them, but I actually said to the fourth grader, I want you to sit down with her and just explain what you would like her to do with you on the ice. And I remember that he looked back at me on the bench like, what do I say? I said, say whatever you want to say. I don't want to tell you what to say, but explain. And, he started to talk to her and he started to say, well, I'm going to do this and I think you should do this. Those are the coaching gifts we can give these kids.
Correct.
If there's a great book, Telling Ain't Training, right? Mm-hmm. All right. If we're always telling them what to do, you're going to create robots. And Mike, that's the problem with high level hockey nowadays is the hockey IQ is not there and they're just doing what they're told. The creativity starts young. And with social clarity, what we're talking about, we've got to teach that. All right. And yes, it can be very frustrating. The younger you go, I think the more frustrating it gets.
Oh, yeah.
If you've ever been to a Mike game, I mean, you know what I say, Vinny? I'll throw this back to you guys. I always say to coaches, if you're doing play-by-play on the bench, you're not coaching. All right? The puck's got to go there. The puck's shoot. Like you're doing play-by-play. Don't do. You're not coaching.
Exactly.
All right? And it's hard. Coaches, listen. Mike coaches, God bless you. It's hard. Okay? I've seen it. Unless you're at my AAA, we'll get into that in a minute. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that, guys, because we do need to, as coaches and parents, encourage our kids to have those conversations. I don't see as many kids on the street anymore just playing hockey outside. They're not doing that nowadays. We can't force them to do it, going back to what I said earlier, but we can encourage those types of conversations.
Bingo. Nailed it. So a couple of things right away pop out, right? Number one, your Fortnite example. The thing I'm always fighting for is how do we create a natural alignment instead of doing it in our own interpretation of how to present information? How do we get to the players' levels to present the information? So to your point, Fortnite, and this is an idea, and Lee, maybe you guys run with this, Mike, you guys put this together, right? Of like, I'm shocked how nobody's put together yet a Fortnite style or a game where they're going to sit and play the hockey game together, and they're all going to communicate. So they learn now how to sit on this game like the same way they do already. They already do that. So create a game that's set up, designed where they're playing together, and the rules are they're going to talk about the game and where they need to go. So now they're just naturally infusing that communication, of how to do that, right? And so that's number one, is how are we creating the conditions to naturally allow them to practice these things instead of us as leaders and adults, right? Because we're all guilty of it, right? In our own way, of course. Like this is the way to do it. But the reality is the art is, hold on, how do we get them to do it without them knowing they're doing it, right? Like the bag skates and all that stuff, right? It's like, wow, one-on-one keep away. Oh my God, I can't believe how hard that was. Yeah. Well, I was skating them. Really? It looked like they were doing one-on-one. No, I was skating them. Instead of up and down, I'm just going to have them one-on-one keep away, and they're going to love it. And that was our skating. So that's the first, part of the art, right? On that end. And then, the other part too, that from a communication standpoint, that's challenging in what you're saying there, right? On the bench as an example. The thing I'm always battling for with the kids. So like simple stuff, right? I put up a video about this a while back, but what I'm trying to infuse with them is, and I talk to the coaches about this all the time, is that we can't coach them on the bench. There's nothing that's going to happen that's going to go on in the game. All we can do is go let them play.
Right.
But what we can do on the bench is create chants. So like I'll do things like move your feet. Move your feet, move your feet. So what I'm doing is getting them to just think about getting excited about cheering on the bench, rah, 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 move your feet. All I'm doing is creating little mantras for them to go and do that, right? But move the puck, move the puck.
Right.
So I'm having fun on the bench with them. And sometimes they're into it, sometimes they're not, right? They're kids. Some days it's like, yeah, let's go. Other days they could care less. Yes, like we have them sometimes chanting, I'm an Eagles fan, so fly Eagles fly.
I had to get one in,
so you're always trying to find ways to infuse where I'm doing the Eagles chant because I know I want them to chant to move your feet at another point. So it's a lot of this stuff, right? That it's like, how do we meet them where they are, but create these opportunities for them to think it's cool. Oh, this is fun. Instead of infusing it the way the adults in the room think, this is the way it's supposed to be done. It's like, they don't care about doing it that way. We do. We want to be able to sit right in our rooms and go like, that's a great idea. Oh, I love that idea. That's all. Good job. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, that's awesome. What about the kids? This is corny. Like this sucks. And it's like, no, what are you talking about? You think I suck? It's like, bud, you're 45 years old. Relax.
It's all ego. It's all ego. It's been known in mite hockey from time to time, munchkins to end up in a locker room after a game.
That's what I'm saying.
It's funny you're bringing this up, buddy, because with my daughter's mite team, I told them, if you want to earn the donuts, you got to skate hard. And so the mantra is donuts on the bench. We yell donuts. If we yell donuts, they skate harder. It's like that's their connection point of like, oh yeah, donut. I like donuts. I wish that worked in adulthood life. We just and everybody would work harder. But it's a good point. Look, you're also tapping on something too. It's got to be fun for the kids at that age. You want to coach a kid out of hockey, make it not fun. All right. Look, competing can be fun too. I'm just saying you got to find a way to make it fun for them. All right. At the end of the day. Speaking of that, you did another great video about competitive culture, and I want to get into that. So the term compete level is becoming more and more prevalent in sports, especially in youth sports. I've been hearing it a lot more lately in the social spheres. I'd love to define really what that is, because I think when we say, hey, you got to raise your compete level to kids, right, I'm not sure they really understand that. And then, again, the competitive culture idea is something I saw in one of your videos. It's a great way to effectively deliver that at a practice, right? Because, guys, we can say anything. Like, you got to find the fire. I mean, I'm not against saying things like that, but, like, if they don't know what that means,
No.
What are they going to do? And you got to practice this stuff too. Go ahead.
Nailed it. And like you guys said earlier, right? The issue we're dealing with is when we came up, right? All of us in our own way. I played streets of Philadelphia, roller hockey and street hockey for 6-7 hours a day. I didn't see my parents.
Yeah.
Like until the ball fell under the light, you're going to the sewer, you're trying to get it out, you're pissed for an hour. That's it. All right, it's dark. I'll get in the morning. We played. Now, these kids are so structured with everything.
Yep.
They've got multiple practices a week. They've got the piano lesson. They've got tutoring. They've got so many things going on that the delineation of, well, what do you mean compete and go hard when my whole day is already hard? As a human being, there is no time to create, to just be, go out, enjoy, be a kid. Everything is like that. And that goes against the grain of a child's nature.
Right.
100%, right? And we can get into philosophical about education a lot, but like to put these kids in seats and then they spend the whole day, cognitively speaking, they're drained. So from a working hard standpoint, they're already working and competing super hard already all day to stay still, to not freak out, they're trying to hold it on because mommy and dad, I want to make sure you're happy. I want to make sure coach is happy. I want to make sure the world isn't upset with me because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do between 4 and 5 o'clock, 6 and 7 o'clock, 8 and 9 o'clock. So that's one of the first issues is that how do you teach that compete part when for us, the way we bias compete, we have freedom to explore when we were younger. What freedom do they have now?
Right.
So in their minds, when you say compete, well, to the point we made earlier, that natural thing of like, let's go out and win and go all that stuff, the ball players, quote unquote, they still have that. That's in them naturally. Like no matter how much you throw their way, they're still going to want to feel that. But now we're trying to infuse that to everybody else who in their minds are like, what do you mean by that? And the reality is when you have so much going on, there's no space to even feel what that is. And to your point, guys, are like what the competitive culture solves is they're used to gaming. So if you create a gaming environment where they're playing and they're getting points and they're feeling all that, now you're replicating the feeling of compete. So now it's easy for them to do it because now they can recognize, oh, it's like playing Mario Kart. It's like playing these games. You get points and tokens. Oh, cool. So there's an association that comes with, oh, I see what you mean. So it's a lot of that stuff, right? That we have to recognize that we try to infuse compete, but they already are competing.
Right.
Like they're competing against their own cognitive nature of like, this is boring. I can't stand. This is so hard to do. And I'm fighting like crazy. And then it's like, then you want them to do more. And it's like, cognitively speaking, they're drained. What do you mean? Right. You want them to do more practice? Coaches are the same way. What do you mean? How many coaches have multiple jobs and you go to the rink and you're exhausted and you want the same output and you're like, you're an adult, you're a professional adult and you're exhausted.
Right.
What do you think the kids are feeling?
Right. Yeah. And go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm just thinking about, how we structure those youth hockey practices. When I say youth hockey, I mean, I'm probably like 14 and under, basically, like where before it's really structured where you have to, a lot of people feel that pressure of, compete level is understanding a system or a forecheck or things like that. But at the youngest levels, I think the compete level, and you bring up a great point. I think that parents and coaches really need to understand is these kids all day are working. All day they're thinking, they're being told what to do, where to be, what unless they're in some great outdoor finish, educational system, like then they're in a desk and they're in a line and they're in that structure. I think that's why, like for me, it's so important when I run these youth hockey practices or I go visit a youth hockey group, every drill or every activity is a compete activity. Right. It's all about a win, a loss, and a small number that's short in time. And if it like the old, the structure of if you're an 8-year-old, your drill or game should be 8 minutes, 9 minutes max. That's it. And they compete the hell out of it. And I think, but you said it earlier, like if I have a kid in a 4-station practice and I have 4 great coaches, in fact, I don't even need 4 great coaches. I just need 4 competent dads and moms that can understand a lesson plan. And if they can just coordinate my tag compete drill, my ringette one-on-one compete drill, my My Little Pony drill, and my other drill in the corner, whatever it might be. And I do that. I got like what you were saying earlier, Vinny. Like I name all my drills for my youth kids. after things that are happening in their real life, like Fortnite stuff and, all these different NHL 25. Like, guys, imagine you're this kid and this is what you're doing, but you're competing. There is a winner and a loser. I think that's important. Yep. But it doesn't matter if they win or lose. Like, so what matters is you tried. And then what you can do if you're a good coach is now I could say, well, I like the way Vinny and Lee competed, but I bet you Vinny and Mike would be more comparable to each other. And that compete level is going to raise. Because it's not always going to be Lee winning all the time. Like, I don't know. That's not competing. Lee winning all the time, that's not competing. It's Coach Vinny and Mike are competing. And sometimes Mike wins, sometimes Vinny wins. Now you start to see these kids elevate. I think when our coaches start to get out of the line drill mode and the structure mode and it looks like a hockey drill, but your kids are like, like the worst. I think the most painful thing for me as a coach is when a kid comes up and says, "Is this practice almost over?" Like,
that's brutal.
Done? And it really bothers me. Like it breaks me inside. Oh, yeah. In contrast to the kids that says, "Oh my God, it's over already!" Like, I can't believe that ended. Like, what happened? I just got out here.
You want them to stay out there forever. I wanted to be out there.
We've been out here an hour and a half. I know you're saying you just got out here.
Yeah.
We've been out here an hour and a half, guys. And because there was no lines, no waiting, no lectures. They're just go, 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 go. If they learned anything, I have no idea. All I know is they beat the hell out of each other, and they were competing.
Well, you nailed it, Mike. Of like just one thing.
You're good. Yeah.
And it's backed up by gaming research too, right? I'm sure you guys have come across this of like the kids, they'll play, boom, and they're so good at, I died in the game. It's over, start again. Right. So they're so good at bouncing back because it's shown like, people make the argument about, there's killing in games. To them, they don't look at it that way. They just look at it as go hard. They're freaking out. I hear my son.
Respawn.
Right? I used to do a whole coaching seminar on one of my shticks was like during a session. Like, you want your kids to stop playing Fortnite? Go teach them how to play Fortnite. Like, stand over their back. Go in that door. What are you, an idiot? How are you going to get better if you don't understand that I don't know Fortnite, so I'm using.
I must be doing something right because my kid wants me to play Fortnite with him all the time.
Yeah. Right. So the thing is, you really want your kids to quit Fortnite, start coaching Fortnite. Start saying, if you die, you don't get dinner. Well, if you die, the game's over. I can't believe you're wasting my money on this Xbox. You stink. You need private, like, imagine Fortnite private. Like, there probably are Fortnite private lessons, but I'm just saying
there probably are.
It's gonna come. But I think it's just if you want, like, I say this to every coach, and some of them get it, the light bulb goes off, but some like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Mike. If you coach the video games like you do hockey, kids won't play video games, but they also won't do hockey.
I gotta say, real quick, this is one of those classic growing up adulthood things where, like, well, people get killed in these games. Guys, they got killed in the games we played too. Mario died. He literally went up and fell off the screen.
Oh, Pac-Man guy was like, like, then he just disappear and dissolve.
Like they died too. Okay, like let's not make this
right. But there wasn't blood coming out of the side of the plane.
I said Mortal Kombat. I mean, it was like people literally. My God, I mean, I can't imagine. Can you imagine being a parent like my mom or dad coming in and watching a fatality? I'm like, that's cool. I get to go again. It's just
all the red dye just sparkling.
Yeah. My point is, this is one of those things. That's not new. In fact, if anything, video games have toned it down since I was a kid. But I'll say this too, one of the things, and again, I like to give coaches takeaways. One of the things I like to do, I don't do this every practice, but I'd say a majority of them, I'll start with some uncoached game, a 3-on-3, something where the kids get out there and they're playing and competing right away, because it always elevates whatever the other drills are, because I'm turning the compete engine on, right? So we do this 3-on-3 we only have one goalie sometimes. Put them on the boards, 3-on-3, 2 minutes, no coaching. Whoever gets the goals wins the game. You keep score. Another one I do that I love, Hungry Hippos. And I do this at older ages. Put the pucks in a circle, have them compete to get them. What's cool about that game is, like, there's always a certain amount of pucks. And I can say, if you want to win, you're going to have to go harder than the other 3 people playing the game. That's the only way to win, is someone's going to have to give more. And I'll tell you right now, guys, coaches, you should audit your drills and ask this question: which drills do they go the hardest on? I'd say there's a 95% chance they're the drills where there's a score or a winner and a loser. All right. Because that, by the way, that mimics the game. I mean, that mimics the competition. So the idea of that competitive cauldron, Vinny, which you so awesomely said on social media, was just every drill. I mean, or most drills should have some sort of competitive outcome. I know it can't be every drill. Right? If you're working on skills, sometimes, you do want to get a little bit in the nitty gritty. That's also good coaching, but create the competitive atmosphere. If you're not doing that and your kids are not having a high compete level in games, I mean, you can kind of put one and one together here a little bit. Right? You're not coaching them to compete. You're just coaching them to have skills.
Well, and that's that repetition that Vinny talked about earlier. Like it's the bottom line. It's like, mental repetition, physical repetition. I had a coach come to, Mike, I really need your help. My girls, they don't drive to the net. I can't get them to go for rebounds. I go, well, so I watched 2 practices. Said, that not one drill that you offer has them go to the net? Not one. Everyone is a shot from the top of the circle and to the corner line.
I've seen that in semi-pro, Mike. I've seen it in semi-pro hockey. They don't go for their own rebounds. And it's like, well, no wonder you're not getting rebounds.
Your goalie stinks at rebounds because he never experiences any pressure. And your forwards stink at rebounds because they never go to the net. So so I think, Vinny, thinking about that, right? Thinking about, because I think most of us as parents and coaches understand the physical hockey component.
Right.
But from when you have to, it's not even dumbing it down. When you age it down to youth hockey, like, how do you instill these little mental cues for kids to use, like, and as a family? Like, obviously they can't go, oh, let's go all in. We're going to do visualization techniques, and you're going to but what can a parent do and a coach do to help at the youth level, like real, tangible bites of information that they can help with their mental game? Because, like, again, I think, not that we don't want your expertise on the physical piece, but I think most coaches they can see a practice and say, oh yeah, well, that works, this works, I know how to do this. But what can I do to help my kids, like, build that mental fortitude?
Yeah, love it. Great question. So the simplest tool that you can use, right, and for those coaches and leaders that want to dive into, and parents, motivational interviewing. So the idea is that what you're doing with the kids is you're just asking them, hey, what are you going to do today? So with my own son, right, I'll do this when we're going, whether it's soccer or hockey, right? I'll just ask, hey, so what do you think about today? What are you going to work on today? What are you going to get after? And just allow to talk. And then as they're talking, they might bring up, I'm going to skate hard. Oh, that's cool. What are you going to skate hard at? What are you going to do? Like, I don't know. I was like, no, you don't know? Oh, okay, cool. So you're just going to skate hard. And is it with the puck, without the puck? So what I'll do is I'll kind of start to walk through and just add flavors to get their schema to go, oh, I didn't consider that. So you build up little by little to allow them to participate in a guided conversation.
I love that.
And then you allow them to talk to you. And that's all you care about. All you're doing is you're questioning, you're prompting. So parents can do that all the time. Like, it's funny how, when I first started out, guys, how often I had issues with high-end AAA kids. Parents were asking 14, 15, 16. They're playing on top 5 teams and the parents would ask, when I get in the car after the game, I start freaking out and I start wanting to point out, what can I do? And I'm like, it's simple. How'd you play today? What'd you think went well? Just that's it. You're done with the conversation.
Yeah.
And allow them to talk. And if they start to say something that's like, oh, this happened. Okay, well, what'd you think about that?
Right.
And all you keep driving towards is, what do you think? How did you think about that? And that is so much of the game, that the first step that any age can do and build up is just sit there and have, hey, so how's the game going to go today? Because that is visualization. That's another form of visualization of, by you prompting the kid, no matter what age they are, they're now visualizing in their head and they're using their imagination to think about what they're going to go
You can Miyagi them into it.
You mean not making them walk home a mile with their hockey bag?
Because your imagination.
I had to do that. I had to do that one time.
I knew it.
Bringing this full circle. My dad did do that to me one time, but it's because I was playing Mortal Kombat in the rink and he was waiting outside. He just left me there, and that was on me. But I always joke that story with my kids. But no, it's a great point, Vinny. We always say on the show, the car ride is not for coaching. And I always tell parents, they say, I want to talk to them after the game. Then you need to not talk to them after the game for a bit. And I'll tell you right now, more often than not all the time, when you don't do that, eventually your kid will say, hey, mom, dad, what did you think of the game today? And that's your opportunity to do what Vinny's saying and say, well, what did you think of the game today? Mm-hmm. All right. They're not going to want to talk to you if you get in the car and just go, you got to do this. You got to do that. You should have hit this. Man, I wouldn't want to talk to you. Yeah. Right after the game. It's devastating to a kid, number one. And number two, the kid has every right after the game not to think about the game. They have every right to do that. Okay. Now, if they want to think about the game, great. Okay. There's nothing wrong with either way of that. But the car ride's not for coaching. And I love that you said that's a step into visualization, right? Which we don't do enough with the kids. And I want to reiterate one more thing you said there, Vinny, which was, guys, coaches, we have to talk to the kids. You got to talk to these kids and get them talking to you. All right. And I've heard before, well, they don't talk back. It's because we don't talk to them. All right.
Well, I guess that's your point, right, Vinny? When you say mental reps, like when you have to get you want to teach visualization without saying it's visualization.
Correct.
It's really just tell me about that play or tell me about that event or tell me about like what you thought you were doing there, and not with no judgment. It's just more like, oh, that was a great play over there. Like what? How'd that come about?
Something I encourage my players to do at every age level, this is not just youth, is, hey, do me a favor, bring me 2 or 3 questions next practice that you want to, any question you want. It doesn't have to be about hockey. Just bring me some questions. I mean, 99% of the time they're about hockey. And they're usually great questions of, I don't really know what to do here. Man, what a great question for a coach. All right. And I don't go, how do you not know what to do there? We've been talking about this for months. It's no. Ask the question. Now, A, you've enabled them to think about it. B, you've enabled them to have a voice. C, they've given you an opportunity to coach them. And D, they're willing to receive because they asked the question. It's a great tactic. It doesn't have to be 3. I want every player just to bring me 1 question. Ask a coach a question. Okay? Yeah. I mean, you're creating that conversation. All right? And kids should not be afraid to ask their coaches questions. They're not used to it. That's what's happening. Okay?
Right there. You nailed it, guys. Of like right there. So when I got started, with Bloodline, it was like 12 years ago now. One of the key pieces of research that went, aha, bling, bling, bling to me was Harvard had put out, it was like a Gallup. You probably find it online, that 85% in the corporate environment, they had asked at the time, it was like millennials, whatever it was, like, what's the biggest issue that you're having with these, kids coming up? And at the top, the biggest percentage was communication and critical thinking. Right. The line's huge, right? And then everything else was smaller. Right away, that's where my head was. I'm like, well, there it is. Communication and critical thinking. So now how do we create the conditions for them to communicate and critically think?
Right.
That's what our job is. Like from a mental performance, mindset, whatever you want to call it, is how do we just keep on, okay, let's get them communicating and let's get them critically thinking about
this.
Because if that's the problem, real world problem we're having clearly in the data, in the corporate world, this is happening everywhere else.
Right.
Of the issue. And so now, to your point, guys, like, that's what I'm always fighting for. And that's the biggest misconception with mental performance. And Lee, I know you can appreciate this, is that people think it's like this taboo, or like you said, yoga, or do my breathing exercise, or meditation. And the argument I've made for a while that, with a lot of our peers, that again, coming from a good place, but it doesn't apply in the same way, is that we can say you can use the tools till you're blue in the face. It's like telling a kid, you know what, go do lunges and you'll be a better skater.
Right.
And I make the argument like, okay, so what you're saying is if they do lunges, they'll be able to skate well, right? Yes. No, they're just strengthening their legs. They're not skating.
Right.
In order to skate well, you need to skate. Lunges will help that. Same thing, visualization, breathing, meditation, your modality. If there's no schema, if there's no understanding of, well, I'm going to meditate because it applies to this in the game of these situations that I'm dealing with to keep me still, calm, and present. If there's none of that connection in reality, not Game 7 Stanley Cup, which most of you will never be in, and you're visualizing this idea. No, real world evidence, real world experience tied to the tool. If you're doing that, now you can use these tools in a meaningful way. But the problem that happens in the mental performance field is people hear these tools and they go, how do I apply that? It doesn't even make sense. And that's the challenge, right, with all this stuff.
Yeah, or they've never applied it. And again, that's where the stigma comes in. And look, we were talking before the show. The stigma is largely disappearing more every day. I mean, we're seeing so much more acceptance into the mental performance, mental fitness world, to the point that the people that kind of have the stigma, I don't want to say I laugh them off. That's not the right term, but it is kind of like, I mean, look, I hope you find it one day because this is what's happening. This is where we're at today. Sorry, Mike, did you have something?
No, I'm just disappointed that I didn't ask all these questions earlier now.
Well,
But I just, but I'm just thinking like that's what you're saying, Lee. Like that's that there, like to me, I don't think it's a stigma. Like when I think of mental health or visualization, I often would, if I'm talking to a parent, it's almost like, oh, you have a problem, or you have, this is a solution to your issue, as opposed to the way I look at it personally. It's like I worked with a bunch of kids the other day, and their visualization was just about, being in an area where they could think about, well, what am I going to do when I get off the ice to present this to my teammate that was a great play, or how am I going to pre-react to a bad pass? Like, am I gonna train myself to do that in a negative way, or a way that's ultimately, and what I try to do is frame with the kids, it's ultimately be selfish. If you want it to help you, help the team.
Right.
Like if you want to be more successful for you, which you should be, then embrace the ability to help your team.
Right. Because
without that group, your success is null and void. And I think this is where I don't know. I think this is where we struggle the most in youth hockey. Is it's me, and every private lesson is about ending with a shot. And really, in reality, every activity ends in a broken play. Right. So it's like, what are we working on and what are we focused on?
Bingo. No, you guys nailed it. And I remember I did a video before about it and talked about this, but Filters Against Folly, great book, Mike, that talks about the idea, right, of it's based in biological nature, like understanding, different sequences. It was like with farming and all these different things. But the idea behind it was it talked about the three filters, right? The literate, numerate, and echolate. And so, literate, tons of stuff, literature out there, write it out. What do we need to do, right? We write out the drills and what we need to do, all that stuff, right? Numerate, data, instat, all this stuff. All right, well, what does the numbers tell us? But then echolate is, and then what happened? And then what? Mm-hmm. So many players, especially in the beginning, guys, are like, and I'm dealing with this all the time with different players of, okay, so after you made the play, then what happened? It's all in practice. You made the shot and then you kind of stopped. You didn't go to the net. You stopped. Like, you didn't think about, well, what happened 5 seconds after that sequence? Where did it go? And that's where we do a really, to your point, Mike, of the pre and post.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's going to happen before when you think about that play, as opposed to just thinking about making that play? What's the sequence of events that's going to happen before? And then when it's done, what's going to happen after? And now you start thinking about that. Well, now you're preparing yourself mentally. You're seeing all the different parts, right? Michael Phelps talked about how his visualization routine was all about worst case scenario all the time. So if you're preparing for that and you're seeing all the angles and you're building that up, it makes it easier to deal with the stress, with the unknown, the uncertainty, the things that'll pop up. It's like, oh man, I didn't think that was going to happen. As opposed to, oh yeah, I thought about that and I saw, and then what happened? And that is a big part, Mike, right there, of that we really struggle with, is that we don't teach to that, is thinking about the sequence of events.
You also just gave a wonderful recipe for hockey IQ in doing that. All right, is the before and after. And Mike, you said something too I wanted to comment on. I love that quote, be curious, not judgmental. We can be very judgmental of ourselves too, right? That doesn't just apply externally. And for the coaches listening, I always think it's such a fascinating and wonderful opportunity when we learn something new as coaches, because it can be easy to look at the season you're in, like, I didn't do any of that. This is a great opportunity now, like, for you to learn. Everything we're talking about applies to coaching as well. One of the fundamental truths I know about coaching is if you're not still learning the game, I don't care how old you are. All right. You're not coaching anymore. Right. Actually, you're just coaching from a place of ego. All right. Like, I'm excited when I learn stuff. And there are many times I'm like, oh man, I wish I knew that 5 years ago or last week. But everything's an opportunity. So audit your practices, grow, become a better coach. I'm an insanely different coach now than I was 20 years ago. Mike, you say that all the time, right? Because life happens. You have kids, you're going to coach differently after you have kids. That's just a guarantee. Listen, I want to end this episode on this. And I've been waiting to ask this question. I mean, you're very outspoken about youth hockey. I think we are too. It's kind of the nature of our show. We have to talk about Mike AAA hockey for a minute. Okay. because just for those of you listening, there might AAA exist. Some of you might have kids playing might AAA. All right. There are a few aspects of it that I get. So, for example, there is such a thing as a third year might, and you want your kid to play full ice, and you want them to be a little more competitive. And I'll just say, I really do understand the concept of wanting some form of evolution if you're a third year might. But where I get lost is when I see the might AAA rankings come out, and the bottom 5 teams, the bottom 5 ranked teams, have no wins. They're getting killed, and you're being ranked for this. What the hell are we doing? I mean, I do not understand the need for might AAA ranked hockey. I do understand the need for high-level hockey at might. I'm going to say it again. I'm not poo-pooing on that idea. But can we just discuss for a second might AAA and what this may or may not be doing to the game?
So about 6-7 years ago, I did this like group, it was a mix. It was an interesting mix. We had literally kids from 9 years old until we actually had a player, pro players in the group, 25. So it was interesting. It was about 15, 16 kids in this group. And so one of the days, so we would always kind of start how things going, what's going on, all that stuff. And it was like it was like one of those 9-week programs or whatever. And the kid comes on Zoom and we start talking about the next weekend of the games that he's having. He was 9. This was the youngest player on the call. 9, the youngest player on the call. So he starts talking about how, I'm nervous about this weekend. I don't know. I'm just kind of feeling a little bit nervous, coach. And he's explaining the story. And then he goes, and he's like, yeah, we're playing the number 1 team in the country. I'm like, wait, what? How old are you? And he's just like, oh, 9. I'm like, what do you mean number 1 team? How do you know that? Well, in the rankings, they're the number 1 team. It was Minutemen, I think Flames, whatever at the time. They're the number 1 team in the country. I'm like, at 9? I'm like, really? But the main thing that I want people to understand is the amount of stress that caused this kid I could see it through Zoom. And I think that's the part that we really forget about the adulting, the things that we want in the competitive nature to infuse into youth, is that we're not recognizing that we're creating this perpetuating cycle of we want to help our kids be better. But then as leaders, adults, parents, coaches, we're creating the very problems that are stressing them out. And then we're fighting the very problems that are stressing them out. So the rankings, that's an adult idea. That's 100%. Not a youth. They didn't come up with this idea. The adults wanted, because they want to feel better, whatever it is. I get it. No problem. But what it's doing to the youth is detrimental, because we all know, I've had this, argument for a while of my mom. Right. So I grew up, first generation Ukrainian. So my mom would always say nervy, nervy. And so in Russian, it's nerves. And I remember as a kid, my dad was freaking out, the culture. It's everything intense and screaming all the time. And you suck and all that stuff. And I remember my mom, grabbing me. Hey, nervy. And what she was saying was nerves. So when the kids are 9, 10, 11, 12, when you're bringing these nervous system energy things that adults do at older levels, when, by the way, biologically, when these kids turn 13, 14 years old and they go to high school, they're naturally going to start to feel this nervousness based off of peer pressure.
Right.
But because you want this earlier, what you're doing is you're damaging the nervous system. When they're younger and you're screaming at them and you're upset with them and you're making these, rankings and you're doing all this stuff, you're damaging their nervous system, making them think there's this thing that exists, this boogeyman, when the reality is that's just coming from the adults in the room. That's not real for you guys right now. What's real for you guys? Wait till you're 13, 14. Right. You're going to feel it all on your own. I don't have to do a thing.
I love where we're going with this, because there's a few things too. When you're a kid, and again, there's backs and forths to this, right? When you put the onus on a AAA level at 9 years old and trying to beat the best team in the country, what you've just taught that 9-year-old is that is the only thing that matters. So now the letters matter more than the development. And if they don't make every AAA team from then to 18, they have now failed if they don't get the right messages. That's why I said there's a lot of black and white in this. Okay. To me as a coach, I want a kid, and Mike, you say this so eloquently every time. You want the kid to be in the place they're going to develop the best. Sometimes that is AAA, sometimes it's not. right? But if you get lost on, well, they didn't make the AAA team, but they're on a team they're going to develop, we've totally missed the point. The other thing is this. I'm going to use kind of a strong metaphor here. The cognitive ability of a 9-year-old. That is not a stress they should endure. And here's the metaphor. Minnie, you brought up Ukraine. There's not one parent in this country that would say, I wish my kid was in Ukraine dealing with that war so they could build the mental resolve that they need to be a successful adult. Not one of us would say that.
Exactly.
Okay? It's horrible what's going over there, but not one of us would want to send our kid to that war zone at this time.
Bingo.
Okay? And I'm not trying to say AAA Might Hockey is a war zone, okay? But the stresses that we're creating may be similar, okay? Outside the extreme side of it, if you know what I'm trying to say. You would never expose your kid to that. Now, I hear it all the time. They need to learn. They need to learn how to deal with adversity. They are learning how to deal with adversity. They're kids. Puberty's coming, man. Like they're gonna deal with it. You know what a 9-year-old needs is the assurance from their parents that my love for you is not attached to the outcome of this ranked matchup. And this is like where I say I go back and forth. If you're playing AAA Might and you're achieving what I'm saying, that's wonderful. I really mean that. But if your kid is coming off thinking, oh, mom and dad, if we don't win this game, they're gonna. Man, we failed. I'm going to say that pretty bluntly. You failed. Okay? The 9-year-old mind cannot comprehend that. The 16-year-old mind maybe can start to. Okay? Because when you realize your parents aren't perfect, the world changes a bit. At 9, they're not doing that.
And can you imagine teaching young kids, we got to win by 7 because of the rankings? What?
Yeah. What? You can't score touchdowns here. I mean, is that metaphor too far out, or am I crazy for saying that, or is that along the? You would never put your kids in that type of environment.
You nailed it, right?
Yeah,
it's like the same thing as I've dealt with this with pro players, guys. Of like, okay, your dad's freaking out at you right now and stressing you out. The team's been losing and all this stuff, and he's freaking out. Have you told him, you know what? When you're at work, if your boss came to you and yelled at you and got upset with you the same way you're getting upset with me right now, would you keep working there?
No.
Well, you've been doing this to me now for weeks. Literally had to have with one of our pro players. The exact conversation that I had to have with dad. When he said it to dad, he was like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Of like, that's not like, you don't deal with it at work. Right. Why are you making it that much harder for me? And that's, again, as parents, that's why it's so hard, to your point, guys. Like, yeah. When you become a parent, you understand it. But that's where it's challenging when I hear, other people in our space that were never a parent don't understand the dynamics of that. And they're trying to speak from the hockey lens of it. And they're missing the other flavors of, oh my God, like I can hear in what you're saying. There's so many other dynamics you're not including into the soup, right? Into how this all thing comes together,
right?
The mindset of it. And that's the challenge we're all getting into.
Maybe to close this episode out, and Mike, if you have any thoughts, I'm not trying to lock you out here either.
No, I'm just saying, it's a real paradox in the youth sports world because those teams are full. It's a parent's choice.
Yeah.
They're full. They're over full. Like if your kid has a mental breakdown, I'm like, ooh, good, get him out there. Get my kid out there now. Like, but it's just like because it's become. The horse is out of the barn. I just think it's the parents and Vinny, we talk a lot about our show here is that the people that really need the conversations don't listen to the show anyway. They don't listen. Like so that like
but you do, and we appreciate you out there listening.
Most of the people in the car and in their house or wherever, and they're listening are going, yeah, exactly. Now I know that kid. Mm-hmm. It's not my kid, but I know that kid.
Right.
But the fact is, the bad part is 50% of us would take that kid's spot if it was offered to us. But what is the race? Like, what is the end game? Right. And I have a really hard time because I'm in the world of when I see these high level kids at the national team and at these elite programs and at 17 and 18 years old, time and time again, that was the environment they come from.
Right.
It is the place that they went through. And my only answer is yes, but you did it by luck. You did it by the fact that the other 99 kids failed. You succeeded. And going back to the original conversation, that's all we embrace is the success of the one, not the failure of the 99. And if you're a youth hockey organization, you don't care about the 99. You care about the one. And all you need is 21s.
And I'm going to say this too. The shift that has to happen there is that 99% that failed. We have to stop calling that failure and seeing if the ROI was that they are better people and they're better prepared for life now because they played youth sports.
They may be, but they didn't win.
No, I know what you're saying, Mike. I'm not trying to contradict what you said at all. I also think that the people that do make it, going back to earlier in the episode, they have the obsessive love for practice in the game and the competing. And again, we said it, you can't create that. You can cultivate it. But I also want to say this too, you know, when I look at things like burnout, which is a reason a lot of people leave the game, you know, to me, and this is a very broad answer, but the solution to burnout is recognizing there's no solution. That's not how burnout works. And then number two is understanding that community is really the key to helping that go away. Right. And Vinny, to your point, to Mike's point, to all of our points in this episode, I always love the phrase, it takes a village. And I think that's something we forget in youth hockey. It's not you versus everybody. It's not the coaches versus the parent. We all have to create an ecosystem together that's going to make a conducive environment for our children to grow as people and hopefully as athletes. Exactly. And if we can't flip that, we're going to a bad place. Now, I am going to fight for that for as long as I am alive professionally, because that's what I love to do. I love working in team environments because we get to kind of show that. But I also know as a coach that if a kid's parent, who's the biggest advocate, is giving them the wrong messages at home, there's not much I can do. All right. I can do what I can do with the time that I have, which is usually 5 to 6 hours a week. And I'm not going to contradict a parent's parenting to their kid beyond a certain point, because that is not okay. Right. You have to raise your kid. I can't tell you how to do that, but I can tell you it takes a village. And as a coach, as a team builder, as a parent, whatever you want to call me, my door is always open for that village mentality. I want to work with you to help your kid become a better person. That should be what youth sports is about. And again, Mike, you bring up a great point about where it's heading. I have to be an agent against that. That's one of the reasons I think I'm here, right? And again, anybody making it, absolutely wonderful thing.
Yeah. No, awesome. and to reiterate, Mike, what you said of like, you nailed it. And guys, and it kind of like sums up, right, of like the issue we have with the culture is that the reason why, right, and we all know the data of like 70% of the kids stop at 13 years old, they stop playing sports. The reality is that when they're younger, it should be all about love, passion, right, making it exciting. So leadership has to be, that's what we're going to infuse into you. But then once you get to that 13, 14 stage, now we're going to teach you how to deal with adversity.
Right.
Now we're changing what this is about. You're now going to learn specifically, hey, you have to deal with the grind. And here's how you deal with the grind, because that's reality. Like you can't, but we don't infuse that. We create a grind right from a young age. Right. Education is, for the most part, terrible, right? We know that in the system, there's a lot of great fundamental ideas out there, but how many get actually instituted? How many are non-negotiable in organizations where no. This is the best practices for young youth minds. Yeah. In hockey, there's no regulation. There's certain principles you have to follow for sure. And there's some great stuff, right? ADM does some great stuff with USA Hockey, and they have it set up. But at the end of the day, it's not that. The governing body kind of sets it. But then we all know, if you talk to anybody from different parts of the country, everybody kind of has their own thing going on, right?
Nobody's cutting you off from hockey. Nobody's cutting you off. Like, oh, you didn't follow the guidelines. Yeah, you're cut off. No, it's just like, oh, you know, shame on you. You should do this. Yeah, well, I have the biggest organization in the world and the most money. So, I mean, it's just a matter of the buyer beware. Choose what's best for your kids. Find the place that fits, you know, your environment and your family and what your kid does. The adage that, you know, it's a race to nowhere is just, it is what it is. This doesn't come up because everyone knows the path. Yeah. Nobody knows the path. So it's just a matter of just put your place in the healthiest place to get better and have fun. And if your kid, Vinny, when you were growing up, right? If you were going to be found, there was no YouTube and Instagram and if you're going to be found, you're going to be found. It's even easier now. If you're that good, you will be found. You don't need to go across the country to exposure camp. If you're good enough, you're going to get found. But be aware, if you're a parent and your kid gets found and they can't deal with it because they can't evolve because of the way they've kind of been instituted into the system, then what does all of that mean? What was all that for? And I don't know. It's a really hard lesson to learn when it's too late to learn it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's why what you guys are doing is so important. That's what, like, just more dialogue, more communication of these ideas that we know it's the reality. But like you guys said, it's out. Like I was thinking about this the other day, like, yeah, like you can't put it back in. The only thing you can do is reinvent it and say, wait, there's got to be a more effective way to do it, and speak to it and say, all right, well, how are we going to develop now under these conditions? Because it's gone. Like the conditions are the conditions. You're not going to change it, but you can change how we reframe it and bring sunshine on it. And like these types of conversations, say, we all know intuitively, this isn't the right way. This isn't the healthiest way. So what are the other ways? What else can we do?
And we have to explore that together. And, you know, to end this show on a super bright note, which is true, the ever-growing audience that this show is creating, and that audience is being created because of you listeners telling other people, you got to listen to this show. You got to listen to this show. I mean, I've had so many people come up to me in rinks recently, and it's growing because you're sharing the show. And this isn't a plug for you to share. What I'm saying to you is the size of this audience is showing you that people want this type of talk, this type of community, and maybe even this type of change a bit. All right. We're all out there. Okay. And that's why the show is Vinny, to your point, thank you for saying it, is so important, because we're creating this voice for the non-crazy, as we say, hockey parenting, as we always say it. You're not crazy. The hockey world is crazy. But if we don't all work together, it's going to stay the way it is. Right. So I have seen changes, and I have seen such great feedback on all the work that all of us are doing. And I think that's going to do it. Vinny, this is an hour and a half show. This might become 2 episodes. We'll find out. I think we could have gone another hour and a half, but we do have our lives to live.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to thank you so much for being here, man. Like I said, I love everything that you do. Make sure if you're listening, follow him at Coach Vinny Malts. Just check him out, guys. He's doing such great work in the space. And he's someone I look up to as well within hockey. So, Vinny, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Ditto, brother. Great job, guys. Keep it up. I love it.
That's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. For Mike, Vinny, I'm Lee. Make sure that you follow us wherever you're found. Tell your friends about it. Share it in your team communications. And remember, if you have a question or you want to ask us something, there's a link in the episode description. Click that. You can text it right to us. It goes to us, or email us, old school now, team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. All of you have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful game. Have a wonderful ice session. We'll see you next time on Our Kids Play Hockey. Skate on. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.